Welcome everybody to the Entrepreneurial Thought Leader Seminar at Stanford University. Woohoo! Or ETL. ETL, as you all know, is the seminar for aspiring Stanford entrepreneurs and is brought to you by BASIS, the Business Association of Stanford Entrepreneurial Students, and STVP, the Stanford Engineering Entrepreneurship Center. I am Ravi Balani, a lecturer in the Management Science and Engineering Department and the director of Alchemist, an accelerator for enterprise startups. Today, we are thrilled to have Vinay Hiremath here at ETL. How many people know of Vinay before today? Okay. How many people have read any of Vinay's posts? Okay,
oh,
terrific.
That's terrible. I'm sorry.
So for those of you who don't know Vinay, you might know the company that he built. Vinay is the co-founder and former CTO of Loom. How many people know of Loom or have used Loom? Okay, so if you've used Loom, you've touched Vinay in some way. So Loom is, as you guys know, is the asynchronous video messaging company that serves now over 30 million users and 200,000 businesses. We are going to do a fireside chat today, but there is so much to Vinay's story that if you don't mind, I'm going to give a little bit more of a detailed introduction to try to get everybody up to speed so that we can have a richer conversation in the fireside chat. Vinay grew up in Illinois, in rural Illinois, in a South Indian family. He went to university at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, and he went studying material science, but he really wanted to take computer science classes. And he managed to find a way to get into the computer science classes, even though he was officially material science slotted. That motif of hacking around what seems to be boundaries is going to be something you're going to notice throughout his life. So he hacks that. He takes computer science classes. He then hacks out of the university system. He leaves the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign and leaves from bucolic, Illinois, and comes to bustling Silicon Valley in Palo Alto and manages to get a software engineering internship at Facebook. He works at Facebook. He doesn't get a full-time offer for a job at Facebook, but he uses that to then apply to 70 other startups, and he ends up getting a position at Backplane, a startup where he ends up meeting his future co-founder, Shahid Khan. And I just want you guys to all take notes on how these different ups and downs lead to ultimate victory. And Shahid Khan would later become his co-founder at Loom. Then in 2015, Vinay co-founds Loom with Shahid Khan and Joe Thomas. The idea also originates from something that wasn't unexpected. There was a previous project called OpenTest, a user testing platform, and they discovered that users were more interested in the video communication tool, which was a feature. And that led to the pivot and the idea of Loom. Fast forward, Loom goes on to raise $243 million in capital from funds like General Catalyst, Kleiner Perkins, and Andreessen Horowitz. Vinay scales Loom from 0 to 30 million users and from 0 to 250 employees. And then he gets acquired by Atlassian for $975 million just 18 months ago. And the Economic Times and others have reported that Vinay made between $50 and $70 million in that acquisition. But Vinay is not here because of that, even though that alone would be enough for him to be here as an ETL keynote. He's here because immediately after, he gets very transparent and honest on his experience post that acquisition. And he almost goes through an existential foray into searching for what a meaningful life is. And he writes this blog post. And I am going to just read out the opening to the post, just to get everybody up to speed. So he writes this blog post entitled, "I am rich and have no idea what to do with my life." And he says, life has been, this is after the acquisition, "Life has been a haze this last year. After selling my company, I find myself in the totally unrelatable position of never having to work again. Everything feels like a side quest, but not in an inspiring way. I don't have the same base desires driving me to make money or gain status. I have infinite freedom, yet I don't know what to do with it. And honestly, I'm not the most optimistic about life." The post then goes on to detail a dizzying array of life decisions made in a short time in this pursuit of really being alive again. Okay, and so just to give the Cliff Notes version of this, Vinay turns down a $60 million retention package. So he has golden handcuffs to work at Atlassian for 4 years for $60 million. He says no. He then starts fundraising for a new startup, a humanoid robotics startup, and only realizes that his real motivation for doing that was to try to mimic Elon Musk, and it didn't come from an authentic space. He then breaks up with his girlfriend of 2 years and starts to confront his childhood insecurities that he needs to heal. He goes trekking in the Himalayas, and then he works for the Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE. And he immerses himself in that and then leaves as well. He goes to study physics in Hawaii. And I believe now, but we'll get the current snapshot, is that he's now working as an intern at a startup and studying as a mechanical engineering intern at a hardware company. And so because Vinay has been so honest with this experience and so raw, it is particularly rare for us to have somebody who's as successful and as honest to ETL. And so with that, we're going to start the fireside chat. But please welcome Vinay to ETL.
Yeah, if you want to get a bunch of people on the internet to hate you, just talk about how rich you are and how terrible your life is and how you worked for DOGE. Those are all things that people immediately are like, oh, I love this guy. I can totally empathize with him.
But people, yes. But is that actually true? Do you feel like the haters outweigh the lovers? Because I feel like there's also a fandom for you too. Do you feel that?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I try not to, honestly at this point, I try not to look at the replies on anything that goes viral.
Yeah.
Just because I'm like, I don't want to absorb people's shitty programming. Like, yeah. I don't really have a desire to do that. There's definitely truth in some of the burns, you know, and so I view it as like you're online getting these like short tweets or Instagram comments or whatever, and there's like an air of truth of it that triggers your insecurity, and it's like an attack vector. It's like downloading a bunch of little mini viruses into your brain and how you talk about yourself. And so I don't really know, honestly. There's like a lot of stuff that's gone viral that I just don't look at.
But don't you feel if somebody says something and you know it's not true, it just passes through you? But if they say something that you actually believe in yourself, that's when it hurts and it stings? No.
Yes, actually, yes. It's when you believe that you have a deficiency somewhere.
Yes.
That it actually stings.
But that's what gives that comment the power, is that actually your genuine belief in that.
For sure. But I mean, if you're like online and you just have a bunch of people talking shit about you, like I don't think we're hardwired from an evolutionary standpoint to like put up with that.
Yeah.
You know, in general. And so yeah, I don't know.
And so so just to start off, how are you feeling today?
I feel great. Yeah. Okay. I'm on like 2 hours of sleep. I've been working late in the factory at the place that I'm interning at. And yeah, excited to be here, just like giving this talk. I feel like I came and watched maybe a talk. I don't know if it was actually for this class, but I watched a talk here with, I believe it was with Chamath.
Yeah, it's probably maybe it was View from the Top, but yeah, it was probably at Stanford.
Got it. And so it's full circle to be here talking about my mental health, you know?
Yeah. And are you in a better mental health space than you were when you initially wrote that blog post? Or do you feel like you're the same Vinay?
You know, it's funny, like when I wrote it, I thought maybe, 100 people would like it and they'd be like, oh, whatever, like this, I don't really know what's gonna take off online.
Yeah.
And I didn't really write it with that intention.
Yeah.
I really just wrote it because I was like, I want to start being honest with myself and how I'm feeling. And I feel like writing is such a good way to do that. It linearizes your thoughts. It forces you to add like a singular dimensionality to how you're thinking.
Yeah.
And so I was really just doing it to be honest with myself. Yes. And then it took off. And it actually took off at like the worst time because I was starting to feel fine. I was like in Hawaii and I was like, oh, life's good, everything's fine. And then like my blog post like blows up and a bunch of people are DMing me and they're like, dude, are you okay? Like, don't do it. Like, don't jump off a bridge. I love you. And I'm like, oh shit, this is like this was not my intention. My intention was just to put something out there and like unplug and go into the jungle and learn physics, which I also did, but it was a bit of a mental road bump that I didn't foresee.
Well, you did see it in a fantastic discussion, and I think whenever that happens, the world needs it, whether you intended it or not.
For sure.
So I think there is also a virtue in being the vessel through which this conversation happens. And so because you're so honest, I'd love to spend this time to really double click on some of these decisions and the emotions.
Sure.
Is that okay?
Yeah, of course.
So I want to walk through some of these moments. So, and I'm going to talk post-acquisition because I think this is an interesting time that we don't have that many perspectives on. And then time permitting, we'll get to origin story stuff on Loom and building a company. But I want to talk about the first critical decision after Loom where you had this decision It's not a trivial one. Somebody's giving you $60 million. You have $60 million of guaranteed cash. You just have to work there for 4 years. And there comes a moment where you actually realize that that is not a decision that you want to take. I want you to put yourself in those shoes. Okay, realistically realize that you're getting, after all this hard work, $60 million. And then really understanding saying no to that. And so this is what Vinay writes. He writes, last March, I had no idea what to do with my life. I knew that staying at the acquiring company was not it for me for the big company reasons you might suspect. Lots of politics, things moved slowly, NPC coworkers, etc. But I found it very hard to give up a $60 million pay package. I had already made more money than I knew what to do with, but your mind does funny things when you start to consider numbers like this. So I decided to go to the redwoods and figure it out. Within 5 minutes of my first hike, the trees smiled at me and whispered their simple wisdom. What is the point of money if not for freedom? What is your most scarce resource if not time? So Vinay, can you unpack that for us?
Yeah, I feel like it should have been an easy decision. Well, first of all, on one hand, I have to admit that I'd already made a lot of money, right? Mm-hmm. So I think it would have been infinitely harder if I hadn't reached my proverbial fuck you money cliff, which for me was $10 million, right? So I'd already surpassed that long ago. Mm-hmm. But I wish I could say it was a really easy decision. Mm-hmm. And so I had to remove myself from the environment that I was in, which was being in New York, traveling around, having fun, spending the money, but not really knowing what I was doing at Atlassian, being is this really that bad? And I think that it just became really clear when I was in the woods, which by the way, I didn't take any drugs or anything like that.
I was going to ask you, was this psychedelically influenced? Because you said the tree smiled at me, but there was no.
No, that's just because I'm fucked up in the head. I honestly, I make a joke that no matter what I'm doing when I'm dating, I'm always in a polyamorous relationship between whoever I'm with and the redwood trees. Because I've learned so much from the trees, which sounds crazy, but I literally have a forest on my arm. And I certainly have taken a lot of psychedelics. I don't want to say I haven't done that, but this was a moment where I was already overloaded on ego dissolution, not really knowing who I was, not really knowing how to make choices anymore, which sounds so weird, but you grind on something for a decade where you just have a guaranteed mission. You're okay, this is the thing that I'm doing, and then it's gone. And it's okay, well, now you're in a big company, you're playing politics. It's clearly that you're doing this to make the rest of your earnout, to feel whole for whatever you did before. And yeah, so I wish I could say it was a really easy choice, but it only became easy once I went to the Jedediah Smith National Forest, which is up in it's up maybe 6 hours north of here.
And was it an instant revelation, or was it something that you always was? So it was easy. It wasn't difficult to say no to that.
I think once I was there, it was pretty easy.
Okay.
I actually think most of the decisions, especially major decisions in our life, are really easy. We know emotionally what we want, but then we just build up all this bullshit around us, usually based on self-limiting beliefs, to stop us from making that decision, right? So emotionally, we already know what we kind of want to do, Even founders of companies, it's the ones that do really well and lead their companies kind of top down. It's they have 1 million people telling them, okay, this strategy isn't going to work because I crunched the data. And it's okay, what the fuck does that even mean? What data? We haven't been running anything for that long. And you ultimately go with your intuition at the end of the day. You take all of these inputs and then you pattern match and you try to make a decision. And so I genuinely think even really hard decisions, the time we spend not making them is mostly emotional. It's not because logically we don't know what to do.
So it's just giving yourself permission to do what you knew what the answer was.
Yeah.
Okay.
And also changing your environment. I think people, especially nowadays, they're not willing to just fuck up their whole life. I was talking, we're so especially at Stanford, right? You're at a university where you've done so much to make it to the top. And it's like you hold on to the security of, I have this thing in my pocket and I don't ever want to let it go. And it's like, but your life is only there when you take risk. And so I think I added that, like, the joy of living dangerously.
Yeah, so do you want to, let's expound upon that. So in preparation for this, Vinay sent us material that was sort of seminal for his thinking process, one of which was from the Indian mystic Osho, who has this talk about the joy of living dangerously. Can you expound upon that philosophy, your philosophy, and you can pull from whatever material?
Yeah, I think the basic premise is, like, a lot of people want to live for comfort. And it's like, even if we say we're like the biggest risk takers, we're seeking comfort always. Like, we're seeking comfort in distracting ourselves, like going on Instagram, going on TikTok, whatever. Like, we're just seeking some emotional support. And it's like, life only thrives in danger. Life only thrives when you feel like you're going to potentially lose something. That's when you're the most present. And so Osho kind of expounds on this. Osho is like kind of a seedy character. I wouldn't, for people who have watched Wild Wild Country, he did try to, like, take over Oregon, the state of Oregon. So I wouldn't say follow everything he says, but he says a lot of beautiful things. Like, he's like, I feel like marriage is, you want to get married to someone, that's fine. You want to, like, uphold respectability in society. Mm-hmm. But why make, like, the woman your wife and the man your husband, right? Like, that's, like, a really ugly thing to do. It's like you're basically trapping this person and you're not giving them agency and autonomy. But it's dangerous to live that way, right? It's like, okay, we're together, but maybe it'll split apart. Maybe this will completely implode, and that's okay. I think, like, life is more beautiful when you live it that way. So that's the basic premise, is like, anytime you don't know what to do in your life, if you just change your environment, like if you think that you're gonna, like, scroll on TikTok, or you think you're gonna eat a bunch of junk food or do something that's bad for you, it's like, if you just change your fucking environment, you can get so much value out of shifting your mental energy, and you'll immediately see where the emotions are. And you'll be like, okay, this is what I need to do. Like, this is what I should be doing.
And if you look out to this audience of these beautiful Stanford faces, do you feel like they are living dangerously, or they are living fully?
Well, I mean, all I know is that she has, like, a judo stick or something. I don't really know what that is, but she looks like she's ready to get into a fight. I think that everybody who came here, like, came to a university of this prestige, it's like, you probably have, like, some insecurities that are driving you. I refuse to believe that you go to Stanford University and you don't have insecurities. Like, I'm sorry. Like, I don't. That's just my belief. It's like, what do you have to prove, right? And so everybody's, like, kind of gone on this journey, and I think there's probably danger in there. Mm-hmm. And there's something that people maybe don't give you the time of day of because Stanford is, like, this really, like, shiny thing, but there's probably a lot more under the surface, I think.
And the other work that you cited when we were preparing for this talk was George Mack, who talks about the virtue of being a high agency individual. Can you share more about what high agency means to you?
Yeah, for sure. So for backstory, I grew up in a really small cornfield town in Illinois. There's a lot of mental health. Like, I know that right now, talking about mental health, it's like, it's either this thing that's, like, totally glorified, or it's like everybody needs to go to therapy. There's, like, a lot of issues in my family, let's just put it that way. And I feel like maybe around the age of 12, like, the color and temperature of how I looked at life, like, it basically shifted to me realizing that everybody around me kind of had, like, a will to live, and I didn't really understand that. Like, I didn't understand how they had that. I was like, I don't know how to get that. And so I went on medication. I went off of medication because I was like, if I keep taking this medication, like, life is not worth living. And so I turned to substances. I started smoking cigarettes when I was, like, 12, and then I started drinking when I was, like, a little older than that. There's, like, a period where I started experimenting with Oxycontin. Thankfully, I got off of that. But I've had, like, an interesting relationship to substances and how I view the world. Mm-hmm. And so I feel like I've kind of been forced into a situation where I have to have high agency, because it's like you have to take agency in order to get out of a situation like that. And the way that George Mack described, this is an incredible blog post, by the way. Like, of all the bullshit you're reading online, you should spend like 30 minutes to read this blog post. It's truly incredible. He just walks through like the brothers who, like the Orville brothers who like created the airplane. And I mean, think about how fucking crazy that is. It's like, you know, you're dating this guy and he's like, I'm gonna fly. And you're like, okay, sure. And it's like, no, I'm like moving to South Carolina now with my brother. And so he talks about high agency as this concept that's kind of at the center of disagreeableness, clear thinking, and a bias for action. And I'm guessing that a lot of people in this crowd probably have all three of those characteristics. Like, I think you have to have high agency to study here, or even to be making it in California, doing whatever you're doing. And so, yeah, I feel like I've been put in a position, I think fortunately now, but at the time, unfortunately, where I've had to exercise high agency in order to get out of that situation, and then in order to, like, you know, pave my own path, which admittedly is like not that. I mean, like, when you think about like a brown dude who codes, who is like taking psychedelics, who was like inspired by Steve Jobs and like moved to the Bay Area, like dropped out in the Bay Area to like work at startups. It's not like it's unheard of, you know what I mean? Like, but definitely requires some agency.
Well, I think the interesting thing about high agency, because I do think the Stanford students all are high achieving, they're confident, but a critical definition that he has there is you have to sort of be disagreeable. Like, you have to go against the norm. And I do think that everybody who's in this room probably is a master of being agreeable, or making actually the people around them like them. Is it true that you think to be high? And I'm wondering, the question I guess I'm wondering is, does high agency, this is again the idea of being iconoclastic, of doing something that actually changes the world when everybody else, if you listen to everybody else, it's taking the red pill. That's effectively what high agency is, and putting your whole soul behind it. Does that require coming from a place of challenge and difficulty, or can you get there from a place of aspiration alone?
Yeah, I mean, I guess like to break that down, it's like where do you get aspiration from? You know? And also I feel like I have a friend whose dad worked on like some of the early verification software for chips in the Silicon Valley. They're extraordinarily wealthy. And I always admired so much in him how hard he worked. And he's like, I just want to be like a great engineer and like work on great problems. And I was like, fuck man, why? You know, I was like, why do you want to do that? Like, you don't have to do anything in your life, you know? And the more I peeled it back, it's like he had a chip on his shoulder of like, well, you know, I feel like everybody assumes certain things about me, and I have like more inside of me. And so I think everybody has like an eternal being inside of them. And, you know, before you were like, you had mentioned the word vessel. At this point, this is going to sound insane, but I already sound insane, so it's fine. I feel like I'm a vessel for Krishna. Like, I truly feel like I'm just here like riding out his vibes. And so, you know, not to say that I don't have like personal agency and accountability and autonomy, but I think that you can come from a place of like striving and wanting, and the reason why or the pain you feel is, it's all relative. Like, who's to tell you that you can't like be disagreeable and like lock into that mode just because you didn't have it as bad as like someone in the hood? You know, it's like, who gives a shit? It's like, it's your own story, pave your own path, and you got like, this is part of it. It's like you have to be disagreeable enough to be like, I don't give a shit what people think. It's like, I'm gonna go do this anyway. I think it can come from both places. Like, I have a supreme belief that people are just like really, so I'll say one more thing. When I went climbing in the Himalayas, I climbed this mountain called Ama Dablam, which is it's a 6,800 meter peak. And I had no mountaineering experience before this. And it was, you know, like, as I was walking into the valley, I realized how badly I had fucked up, because every single person I met who looked like they had decades of mountaineering experience was like, oh, Amma, like, how long have you been training? And I was like, none at all. And they're like, that's dumb, you know? And I bring this up because I bring it up to basically say that like at the end of this journey, I had like I got hypoxic, I really would have died if I didn't have a Sherpa. Of course, people on X told me how illegitimate my accomplishments were because I had a Sherpa. But you know, I think that I bring all this up to say I came back from that like reminded that people are just capable of so much fucking more than they think they are. Like, it's unbelievable how much you're capable of. Like, you wouldn't even believe it because you have all these self-limiting beliefs. It's unbelievable how much you're capable of, and more times than not, the reason you're not doing it is because you are scared of the success, or you're scared about what it tells you about yourself. You're scared of like it validating something positive that you've told yourself that's been negative for so long. And the way that I see it is you can roughly build up your relationship with yourself and the way you talk to yourself with 3 different strategies, and 2 of them are dog shit. So the first is like, you can just identify with the default thoughts that you have, which are usually terrible because we've been evolutionarily, we've evolved to side with negative thought patterns in order to survive. And so if you identify with like your negative thought patterns all the time, that's who you become, and that's just kind of the default. The second strategy is that you can wait for the external world to validate you, which is also a terrible strategy. Because in order to do anything meaningful, you have to be rejected a ton, like all the time. And so if you're gonna achieve anything meaningful, basically your self-talk just goes down like this as you keep going. And so you don't wanna like rely on external validation. The third way to do it is to basically tell yourself, okay, I'm gonna positively talk to myself. I'm gonna talk about myself in a positive way as long as I do the action. So whether that's like getting up on time, whether that's working out, whatever it is, it's like, fuck yeah, let's go, let's do it. And it sounds really cringe, but the reason that you cringe at it is because you have a bunch of negative self-talk and you're broken, just like me. And so it's like, you need to inject this positive self-talk, and then as soon as the negative self-talk comes up, you observe it, which creates distance from it. You don't identify with it, and you say, okay, this is like shitty programming that has been embedded into me by random people, and I'm not gonna side with it. And then my little trick is that I like to turn up like the bitchy tone on it. So like if I like, I don't know, like if I'm like at a party and a girl like walks away and isn't interested, I'll be like there'll be a part of me that's like, see dude, like I told you. And then I just turn it up. I'm like, see dude, I told you, man. And then I think about like Vinay being like super overweight and like and that helps me like create some distance. Yeah. But this third strategy is like the best strategy I've found, and I feel like if you can talk about yourself in a positive way, you guys don't even know how much you're capable of. Like you're literally trapped in your own thoughts right now, and everybody is. Like 99% of people are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's profound. I think it's going to be really fascinating to see how people react as you speak, because I can see people seeing you as a visionary, and some people will say you're crazy, and that is the world that you confront when you try to do anything.
Or it's not that deep, right? It's not that deep.
And is that the worst type of insult?
Oh, I don't care.
You don't care?
Whatever.
There's so much that we can continue to talk about. I want to also give the students also opportunity to ask questions. So in 5 minutes, I'll open it up. And there's more that I wish I could talk about than we'll have time for. I do want to talk about the Department of Government Efficiency if you can, just because I think people are going to be curious about what that experience was like. I know there's a lot that you can't share about that. But is there anything that you can share about things that you learned in terms of how it operated and what you took away from that experience?
Yeah, definitely. I can definitely share that.
Okay.
Yeah, there's obviously a lot I can't share. I was there for 5 weeks, you know? But 5 weeks at DOGE is like 10 years of working somewhere else. Like, I genuinely mean that. It was basically like Thanksgiving Day. I'd had the final call with someone who had interviewed me. And they're like, cool, are you down? And I was like, I'm down. And he immediately added me to all of these signal groups, and he's like, you need to start working right away. And I was like, I have Thanksgiving. And he was like, we all fucking do. And I was like, great. And so I started getting to work, and what I learned, and now I can reveal his name just because it's been in the news, but I basically worked very closely with this guy, Steve Davis, who's one of Elon's right-hand man. He like helped do the ops for all the Twitter X takeover. He is the CEO of the Boring Company. He does a lot of stuff. And this guy's like a real life video game character. Like, I'd never been in calls with someone like this where like, we're just talking about really high level and then really intense strategy, like government strategy, legal strategy, ops strategy, technical strategy. And we'll literally be in these conversations with him where he's like going really deep with us, asking us really good questions, and then he'll be like, hold on, and then he takes a call, and then like solves some shit that just sounds super important, and then immediately goes back to our conversation. I was like, I didn't even know people existed like this, you know? He is constantly context switching every 5 to 10 minutes, and he's doing a good job of it too. He's not even doing it, like I would do a terrible job, you know? He's doing like a great job. And so I think what I ultimately learned from that experience, because I always felt like I was a super urgent person, and seeing Steve Davis, I was like, oh, I'm like nowhere near the top. Like this is a totally different level. And I basically just reflected on that. And I was like, okay, if I'm being honest with myself right now, like, does it seem like a well-adjusted thing that I just broke up with my girlfriend? I did all this crazy shit. I climbed mountains in the Himalayas, and now I'm working at DOGE in Washington. It's like, am I like working the most urgently on the most important thing for myself? And it was so clear that the answer was no, that's what precipitated me leaving and then going to Hawaii. And I mean, like, what I learned is just like, you wouldn't believe like how fast you can get things done. I mean, we were talking to somebody who we were trying to convince to like join the team. This person's like very caught up in a lot of other things, and you know, me and this other guy were talking about how we were going to land him. Steve hops on a call with him. The guy's like working with us in 4 minutes, and so it's like it's just a different.
Is it just magic, or is there anything tactical that people could take away that you noticed that they did that you could operationalize?
Well, the most important thing is to have an undeniable mission. I mean, not everybody is afforded the grace to be able to work on something that the people who are at least working on the same thing feel like it's an undeniably important thing to do. Obviously, not everybody's going to agree with that. It's highly political.
Yeah.
But you know, everybody we were talking to felt that way, right? And so that's the most important thing. Okay. So identify the most undeniably important mission or thing you should be doing in your life. You get massive tailwinds. You don't always have the luxury to be able to do that. But that's number one. Number two is like, remove all the bullshit. So like one-on-ones, like, you know, why do interviews have to be 30 minutes long? I don't do interviews past like 15 minutes anymore. It's like, why can't you get everything you need out of like a 10, 15-minute call? Why do you need meetings with more than 3 people at all? Why do you need that at all? Like it's just like a waste of time. Basically anything where we've always felt like it was bullshit, like just not doing that and then seeing what happens, you know, that's probably operationally,
so operationally, were there one-on-ones, or was it all just everybody was doing their work and checking in on Signal? Or
I mean, there were no one-on-ones. Like it definitely
one-on-ones.
wasn't like a fuzzy culture. Okay. You know what I mean? Like people weren't like, man, I just really didn't like the way that Steve like told me to do this thing. It's like, all right, guess I'm doing it, you know, which is also great because it's like everybody's just doing the thing.
And is everybody just self-motivated, or do you get like, we can talk about it later too, but
yeah extremely self-motivated.
Okay. It's not like they give you like an action list that you're checking off. You're just doing things that you think you need to get
I mean,
done.
sometimes they would, especially as you're getting in and just trying to absorb a massive amount of context about, you know, the federal government employs over 3.5 million people, which is retarded. To me.
Yeah.
But you know, it's like you're absorbing so much information that for sure some of it has to be tactical still.
Okay. I don't want to be selfish. I want to share, Vinay, with everybody else. I know there's a bunch of questions, so we'll open it up. Just raise your hands if you can so that we can get one question and somebody on deck, and our team will come around with mics. If anybody else has a question, you can raise your hand to be next. Okay.
Hi, Vinay. Thanks. Just curious, what are the traits that you have seen of great operators over the past 10 years, from 2015 to 2025? And what do you think are the things, skills, or habits that have compounded for you over the years that still you're reaping the benefits of?
Yeah, skills and habits. Okay, I'll go with the operators. I think the greatest skill of like operating, right? Like, what does it even mean to be an operator, right? It's like, okay, you have a goal, and then you have a bunch of plumbing that needs to be put in place in order to like get to that goal. Basically, the least amount of plumbing necessary to answer that question, deliver whatever you need to deliver, is like the right path, right? Especially if it's the highest priority thing. And so to be the trait that I've seen of the best operators is to, basically it's just one trait, which is to ask like uncomfortable, dumb questions. Like if you just do that, you will figure everything else out. So it's like, okay, like I'll give you like an engineering one. It's like, we're writing all of our backend services in C++. Why the fuck are we doing that? It's like maybe like it's this ego thing where like this it's higher performance and like, yeah, but we can't hire anybody. Like that's a great operator, right? It's like, why are we doing this thing? Can we change course? I think just the ability to look dumb and not care unlocks so much in your life. And for an operator that's like kind of, I don't like to put out silver bullets, but that is kind of like the ultimate answer for everything. It's just the ability to ask dumb questions. Like most of the time when people take a long time to ramp up, it's because they're spinning their wheels trying to figure out, oh, but I don't like really understand why we're doing this or doing this. And they just like avoid those conversations. They don't want to bother people. But if you're able to ask the dumb questions and just not care and just push forward and almost like prioritize your own ability to like get to high agency, those are the best operators. And they're all sorts of different operators. Like our COO, Anik, is like one of my dear friends. She's like very different than me and then very similar in some ways. And then Joe is like very different than me. So I don't know if there's like a personality thing, but I think that one thing of asking dumb questions.
And which skills and traits do you think have compounded for you?
And which, I'll just repeat the question because we need the mic for the it's which skills and traits have compounded for you? Have compounded over the last.
For you.
All right, yeah.
I think one skill is to just like, I already said this before, but to just move. Like you definitely need to sit in your emotions and figure stuff out. But I think the default is that people sit in their emotions way too long. And now they like therapize it, right? Like, which is even worse in my opinion, but I mean, whatever. Like therapy is good. Like I'm not saying don't go to therapy, but I think like the skill of just like moving, like if things seem wrong, move, like is a skill that is like paid massive dividends. Other skills like keeping in shape. There was a period where I was working 100-hour work weeks for 6-7 months at Loom, and I was juggling 2 different executive roles. I was our CTO and our VP of people. I have no fucking idea how I ended up being in head of HR. I think that's like should be like obviously laughable to anybody here. But I was in this position, and I'd really lost like a lot of my health boundaries, and I'd stopped working out. I'd started partying a lot. I was in New York. I got over not being able to go to sleep by like drinking, and it culminated in us like me leading with the rest of the team our first round of layoffs and then our second round of layoffs. And I was just in a really dark place. And then I re-engaged, and I was just like, I have to make health a priority. So I haven't kept it consistent all along, but I think like getting exercise and moving is like probably the second, actually that is probably the most important thing, is like exercising. Yeah.
Other questions? And you can keep your hands up, and we'll try to put somebody else on deck. Okay, terrific. You'll be second. You'll be first. Okay, go for it.
Thank you. Thank you. What's your definition of a life well lived, and how has that changed for you over the past few years?
Yeah, what is my definition of a life well lived, and how has that changed? I fundamentally believe that like we're just all regret minimization machines. And so I think everybody here would ideally like to look back on their life and be like, okay, I have the least amount of regrets, right? And so for me, that's definitely shifted over time. There was a period where like minimizing regret was like getting out of Huntley, but I didn't really give a shit about my health, and like I was doing a bunch of drugs. And then there was a period where minimizing regret was coming to the Silicon Valley and like being a tech bro and hacking, and that's all shifted. Like I don't care about those things as much anymore. But I think if you generally just ask yourself like what would make me not regret like this moment down the line, and you just keep doing that, like that's ultimately the answer. For me, a life well lived is like I just love the feeling of, this is like really woo-woo and kind of like high level, and I know I'm giving some of those answers, but these are like broad questions. I think I would like to look back on my life and be like, okay, I didn't like wait to make that action because of what I thought society thought about me. That's like one vector. 2 is like I didn't hold myself back from even thinking about possibilities in my life because of things that I couldn't control from the past. So like, one example, this is just because I don't want to like share some of the examples that I'm wrangling with right now. maybe I will if you want to come talk to me one-on-one, but like one example might be, and this is not me, but one example might be like one of my friends is like, he's in a marriage and he's like, I don't even know if marriage is for me. Like I thought it was, I told myself that it was, and now I'm really not sure. And so I think like the more you allow yourself to think things that are like naturally taboo and just think through them without judgment as much as possible and then come back to it, like to me that's a life well lived. Just allowing myself to think things. Yeah, and just having a good fucking story. You know, it's like, if the story is going to be great down the road, it's like generally go do it unless it harms other people or like majorly harms yourself. I think that has all like the whole thing with like the Himalayas and DOGE and like, I'm not going to look back on that and regret it. You know what I mean? Like I'm going to look back on that and be like, I fucking lived life and I'm happy about it. And so I think generally like going for the story. The other thing is like everybody's a character. Like we work off of symbols, right? And so we try to emulate these other characters in our lives. And so who is your character is like an interesting question. Whenever I find that, like whenever I found like a manager or a leader at Loom lacked like vision, I wouldn't have them think about like the infrastructure strategy. Like that's not gonna fucking, you know, like some people it gets them going, but I was like, who are the like video game and like comic book and like book characters that you look up to? So in this case, like this guy who was our head of infrastructure is like, I've always looked up to House because he's kind of like an asshole, but he's also very knowledgeable, so people put up with it. I kind of look up to General Iroh in Avatar: The Last Airbender because he's very like calm but wise and always has the right answers. So I think the other thing is like a life well lived. It's like, do you have these characters clear in your mind of who you're trying to emulate, even though you'll never 100% be them? Because otherwise, especially in an age where we're hyper connected, we're constantly being told which character to be, but we're not any of those characters. We're our own self.
Awesome. Thank you for the question and the answer. Next question is over here.
Yeah. Is this on? I think it's on.
It's on.
Okay. Hi. Thank you so much for coming and speaking to us today. My question was, if you, given everything you've experienced post acquisition, if you were to go back, would you choose to like have Loom not get acquired and continue working as like CTO, like co-founder of Loom?
I think there's a part of me that it, like when we first got acquired or when we first were like, okay, this is happening, I think there was a part of me that was like, it was bittersweet because basically after our second round of layoffs, the team really rallied and we found ourselves in a position where we had gone from like stagnating growth to 450% year over year ARR growth. And so the team was like buzzing. I mean, they were like, this is fucking awesome. We're gonna be like a huge company. We're gonna take over Zoom. Like some of the stuff we were saying was like ridiculous, you know, and I loved it. I loved it. And so there's like this in the background. And then there's also, okay, from like a fiduciary standpoint and from a money standpoint, how do we maximize like value to Loommates that have been on the team for so long? And then there's also like a strategic question of, okay, like for the next like 10, 20 years of my life, is it this or something else? And I would say that I like vacillated between those three things pretty often, like frequently, every single day. And then, you know, like after it all happened, I think I realized, I was like, oh, I'm really happy that that chapter has like closed and I'm able to focus on the next chapter because I have clarity for what that is. I realized that like a lot of me trying to hold on to growing Loom or hold on to anything that isn't me is me trying to like control and find safety in like a sure thing when life isn't a sure thing at all. Like I could end up like homeless in the future. I could end up crazy. Like who knows? And so I'm happy that I think I'm more focused on being happy and grateful for the opportunity to do whatever I'm about to do at this point. But at the moment, I think there was conflicting thoughts for sure.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have time for one more question. Okay, if somebody's got a good burner.
Yeah. Can I ask?
Yeah. Let's hear some burners.
Oh, sorry, we're over here. Sorry.
Okay.
Okay, go for it.
Can you hear me well?
Yeah.
Okay. So my question is, was the Loom the first product that you built, or you built other products and you failed? If you failed, what lessons did you learn from that failure? And when you started Loom, did you know that it's going to be success? And if you and
One question.
What was
One
the
question.
Okay.
So did you get that, or do you want?
I did get that. So basically, it was like, okay, have you built other products before Loom, or even at the same company? What did you learn from those product builds? And then, did you know it was going to be successful? Yeah, dude. I mean, like, I interned at Facebook, so Meta. I worked on like the mobile composer there. I was super junior. I had like a ton of, I didn't feel like I belonged, to be honest, and I probably didn't from like a skill standpoint. And then I worked at Backplane, which was like basically Lady Gaga's social network. It was like an absolute disaster. The day before I joined the company, the CTO had gotten fired, and the reason is because he didn't actually know how to code. The way they hired the guy was they opened up applications for a CTO and picked the first person who had an @google.com email address. And he ended up being a UX intern. He didn't even like have any technical skills. So that company was like a shit show. Like I learned how to build a lot really fast, but I also learned like absolutely how not to run a company. I also learned how to like hire people based on vibes, which I feel like we try to do this thing, like this weird thing where like, we're like, okay, we're gonna make everything as mechanical as possible and like give you like leak code questions and all this shit. And it's like, it doesn't like, it excludes the entire human element. And so I learned that at Backplane. Then I went to Up There, which was a highly technical team, and I got super technical. But then I learned the value in like building a real business and not like a research experiment, essentially. And so I built a product that ultimately nobody wanted to use and was like broke all the time because we tried to build everything ourselves. And then at Loom, we pivoted through the user testing space, and we're just utterly failing for 6 months straight before we decoupled our extension from the platform, and that ended up becoming Loom. We had no idea that was going to be successful. Like on our landing page, we made up a bunch of use cases that we thought people would use it for, but we really had no idea. And so like one of those use cases was like resume overviews, which is like not a major use case today. And so, it was one of those things where we released the product, and then, Michael and Danielle from 1517 came down to our apartment because they were going to write us a pity check because we had like basically run out of money. And we were like, okay, I know that we were going to talk about the user testing company, but this other thing is taking off. We don't really know why, but let's talk about it. And so like lots of learnings for all of it. I think the major learning is that ultimately if you're building a product to gain traction, you want to solve a real problem. And we think that we know what problems people have in the real world, but we really don't. And so the entire thing of like product market fit is just like going out with a hypothesis and then like relentlessly iterating and shifting the way you view the world based on what you're learning, based on whether or not people will give you money, right? And so that's like the ultimate learning. And I learned that like in very different ways at all these different places where I built product before.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the question. Thank you for the answer.
Yeah.
So with that, we'll have to draw this ETL to a close. So please join me in thanking Vinay for sharing so generously